Today I'm going to be talking about using tinfoil to create an armature or inner skeleton for a clay figure for stop motion or claymation animation. The concept of armatures is pretty simple. It's the inner skeleton that lets your figure have more flexibility and more detail than they might otherwise have. To start this process, you'll need some tinfoil. Aluminum foil or tinfoil is a really flexible product that is able to be used, and you're able to kind of buy it at any grocery store. But you could also use things like pipe cleaners or wire if you have it. Even bent paper clips is a really great way of creating a simple and easy armature for inside your clay. So I'm going to start with figuring out what kind of shape I'm wanting to do. In this case, I'm going to make a head, so I want like a round shape, and a body. So I'm going to kind of crumple my tinfoil up to create the shape that I want. As I go, I can crumple details into my tinfoil, if I am choosing to do that, by pinching before I crumple it very, very dense. Once it's been crumpled really dense, it's hard to change the shape. So think about what kind of shape you're wanting before you kind of get really hard with it. However, you can still change the shape a little bit, so it is quite malleable in that way. So you can see here I'm starting to make the shape of kind of like a dinosaur shape, right? You can see the spikes coming up on the back. And I'm getting this just by pinching the tinfoil and making it more dense. Now you can see it's not done yet, obviously. It's just got the spikes and the head and a little bit of the belly. So you can add tinfoil together by wrapping it around the part that you've already made. And that'll kind of give it a starting spot or a base. Be careful though, tinfoil rips really easily, so don't try to do too much at once. And make sure you wrap a couple of times before you crunch it down. In this case, I'm going to crunch it to make the tail. If you end up with something that's too big, it's not as nice as you wanted, or maybe it's just too much tinfoil, and it gets to the point where it's so dense you can't tear it anymore like you could when it was super easy. It's pretty easy to sort of gently wiggle the tinfoil back and forth, and it'll sort of release its crumpled shape if you work at it gently with your fingers. If you do this, you can then get it so it's a thin enough layer that you can then tear with your fingers the parts of the tinfoil that you no longer want. So right about there for me. So for me, crumpling up and getting the body of my dinosaur. Now I'm also going to need some tinfoil to make my arms and legs. But right now, it's such a way that I can't attach anything to here if I want it to come out. So I'll show you how do we make connections using things like paper clips. Paper clips are a pretty easy modeling tool. You simply take a regular paper clip. This one's extra large. I like the large ones because they're a little more sturdy, but you can use any size. And simply grab it and bend it out. In this case, I'm going to bend it all the way out till it's pretty flat. Then I'm going to take this paper clip and figure out where I want the arms of my dinosaur. So in this case, right about here, and I'm going to poke it through the tinfoil. It takes a little bit of pressure, but it goes through quite nicely. When you have it about where you want it, bend the paper clip over so you don't have that sharp end, and you actually will end up with a double piece of wire. If you have a tool, this can be a lot easier. A tool like a needle nose pliers or a regular pair of pliers. But because paper clips are really malleable, you can also just use your fingers. Figure out where it was supposed to be and bend the first part of the paper clip over again. You don't have to bend it completely in half. As long as you just bend the little end so you're not ending with a sharp point, it won't stick through your clay, which is what we want. So that's pretty good. So now I've got the arms of my dinosaur. I can bend them forward and get them into a good starting position. Something like that. Now, I could just cover this with clay as it is, or I could continue to add tinfoil. If I want to make these a little more bulky, I can add a little tinfoil to them. Take a small piece. Even a piece that's already wrinkled can still be used. And wrap around the wire. The more you wrap, the bulkier it'll get. The less you wrap, the thinner the piece can be. So you have to make choices about how big or how small you want your parts to be. I'm going to go away and I'm going to make the legs of my dinosaur in the same way, using a couple of paper clips this time, instead of just one going all the way through. When I come back, I'll talk about how do we cover this now with clay to actually make our armature into a functioning clay critter. So here's my finished armature. My arms are connected, so whatever movement they go up, they do it together. My legs, though, are independent because I did them out of separate pieces, so one can go forward and one can go back. This is really great for animation. I'm going to use clay to make the lower jaw so that will be a separate piece all by itself and can also open and close. I'm going to show you now how do you go about covering this armature with clay. To start with, you're going to need your clay and you're going to need it to be flat instead of three-dimensional. So the first thing you'll have to do is you'll need something to roll your clay out onto. In this case, I chose wax paper and my mat. You might have something similar. I would not recommend you do it straight on a table. Because this clay is sticky, it will make a mess. So make sure you put something down to protect your surface. Then you'll need something to roll with. I'm simply going to use a marker with a smooth side. If you have like a Mr. Sketch marker with a bumpy ridge or a Sharpie marker or something with a clip, that won't work very well. But this one has a smooth side, so this will work really nicely. You could also use something like a rolling pin or a pencil if you don't have a marker, but a marker really best. The cool thing about this is that you can wash it when you're done because it is plastic. So I'm going to take my clay of whatever color I want for my dinosaur. In this case, I'm going to choose pink. And I'm going to roll it out. It is helpful if you kind of start with a more like a sphere shape rather than a coil. So it helps if you warm it up in your hands, squish it in your hands, warm it up a little bit, get it going. Then when you feel like it's pretty warm, roll it with your hands to make a sphere. From here, put it on your surface. Use your hand and give it a start to flatten it out. It might stick to your hand. It's not a big deal. Then, with your marker, gently roll across the surface of the clay. Make sure you're not just pushing the marker. Like some people I've seen go like this. That doesn't get it very flat. That just puts ridges in it. So make sure you roll it like you're rolling cookie dough. At some point, you want to pick up your clay and turn it upside down. This creates a flat surface that isn't changed by the fact that the marker might be making some ridges. So periodically, you want to pick it up and turn it over. Keep rolling. Notice that I'm kind of moving my mat or my setting around, and I'm rolling kind of in every direction. This keeps me from getting one spot too flat and not the other part too thick. So just kind of roll across the whole clay till you feel like you've gotten the right thickness. Now my clay was not very big to start with, So this is about as big as I can make it when I go flat, which is fine. I can make it a little bit flatter still by taking my fingers and pulling gently in the center, but you want to be careful you don't go too flat yet, otherwise you might end up poking a hole through the center of it, then you have to start over. From here, I'm going to cover my armature with the clay. You may need several pieces like this in order to cover an armature of this size. Keep in mind that any moving parts you want to have be a separate piece of clay. So I'm going to cover from the back of the arm to the back of the arm. Something like that. Then I can take a tool, like my toothpick, and simply make a little cut in the clay, and that will cut away or pull away any of the clay that I don't need. My goal here is to cover the surface of my armature, pushing down gently wherever I did my molding, and I can also create new forms that I maybe didn't include in the original armature. But I don't need as much clay to make a much bigger figure than if I was just doing this straight out of clay. So I'm going to spend a little time and cover my whole figure with one color or another color of clay. When you're pretty happy with how your project is looking, you can go ahead and call it done adding clay. You may have noticed that some places the tin foil or the clay will tear through and you'll see it. So periodically you may have to go back and kind of smear or smudge the clay in order to fill in some of those gaps and spaces. Don't be afraid to spend a little time with this, especially before each new shot. If you're worried about losing where your figure was, put a little post-it note, a sticker, or even a different toy down where it was so you don't forget. So my project looks pretty good. At least it's fully covered. The bottoms of the feet are not covered. I did not have enough clay. It would be nice if there was clay there, but because that won't be shown in the shot, it doesn't matter. Some things, though, that you want to think about is the texture of your creature. Right now, it's that smooth, very Play-Doh clay texture, which some people really like. However, if you use something like a toothpick, you can go in and add texture that is more appropriate for the creature that you're making. So if this was like a wolf, I might go in and add short little lines. The camera doesn't pick it up right away, but through the course of a project and through filming, you may notice that it makes a difference as far as how something looks. However, be advised that whenever you touch your project, if you're not careful, you can smear away any light textures that you've made. This, however, is a dinosaur, so instead of doing like that, I might make little U shapes in rows to make scales. Some people have argued, or recent science has shown, that actually dinosaurs may have been feathered. So on the other side, I might do a feather shape instead. Long U's with a line through the center. Either way, it can look really cool. I can also add small details, things like eyes or even teeth, to really make my creature pop. And you can see that this, because it's clay, is very easy to open and close. These, with armature, can go up and down. The legs can go back and forth, and they're not going to ruin the shape, unlike working just straight with clay might do. You still want to make sure, though, that you're not going to pop through and have lots of silver showing in your shot. So just make sure whenever you do a movement that you look and see, look, now there's a big gap. So take that clay and smooth it out. You may end up with a lot of muddled clay at the end, but that's okay. It's kind of the beauty of this. If you want really small details on anything that's not really mobile, you can use a pair of scissors, your fingers, or a toothpick to help you get really cool small details. In this case, I would make the little claws or hands. simply by pressing down through the clay. Careful that you don't press too hard though, like I just did, because I just broke this piece off. It's very easy to fix though, because it's just clay. I hope this was helpful in getting an idea of how to go about making and molding an armature into a clay-covered armature for film production in claymation animations.